Dr. Lisa Carter stepped off the transport ship and onto the metal platform of Kepler Station. The space station floated in the darkness between stars, far from any planet or moon. Cold air hit her face as she walked through the airlock. This was her new home for the next 6 months. Lisa was a scientist who studied alien animals. She had spent years learning about creatures from different worlds. Now she had a new job at this remote station. Her bosses on Earth told her it was important work, but they did not tell her much else. Commander Jake Morrison met her at the docking bay. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He wore the blue uniform of the Space Defense Force. When he shook her hand, his grip was firm, but his smile looked forced. "Welcome to Kepler Station, Dr. Carter," he said. "I hope you are ready for some unusual work." Lisa followed him through the narrow halls of the station. The walls were white metal, and the lights were bright. Through the windows, she could see nothing but black space and distant stars. The station felt cold and empty. "How many people work here?" she asked. 43 crew members," Jake replied. "Most are soldiers or technicians. You are only the second scientist we have had in 2 years." They walked to the command center. Jake showed her a chair at a computer desk. The screen displayed files and reports. Lisa could see pictures of strange creatures and maps of distant planets. "Your first case is already waiting," Jake said. He opened a file on the computer. 3 weeks ago, we caught something on Zarian Prime. The colonists there were having trouble with a predator. They asked for our help." Lisa looked at the pictures on the screen. The creature was huge, almost as big as a truck. It had 6 legs and long claws. Its skin was dark green with black spots. The head was shaped like a triangle with 4 eyes, arranged in a square pattern. Sharp teeth filled its mouth. "What kind of animal is this?" she asked. "We call it a Vorthik," Jake said. "It is the top predator on Zarian Prime. These things hunt in the jungle and can kill anything they find. The colonists lost 12 people before we got there." Lisa studied the pictures more carefully. The Vorthik looked dangerous, but something about it seemed familiar. She could not explain why. "How did you catch it?" she asked. Jake's expression changed. He looked uncomfortable. "That is the strange part. We sent a team to hunt it down. Sergeant Roy Phillips led the mission. They tracked the Vorthik to a cave in the mountains." He opened another file. This one showed video footage from the mission. Lisa watched as soldiers in armor moved through dark jungle. Their helmet cameras recorded everything. "The Vorthik was waiting for them," Jake continued. "It attacked as soon as they entered the cave. 2 soldiers got hurt badly. The creature was about to kill Phillips when something weird happened." The video showed the moment Jake described. The Vorthik had knocked Phillips to the ground. The creature stood over him with its claws raised, ready to strike. Then Phillips did something unexpected. He reached up and pulled off his helmet. Lisa watched as Phillips looked directly at the Vorthik. For a moment, neither moved. Then the creature's posture changed completely. Its claws lowered. Its aggressive stance melted away. The Vorthik stepped back and sat down like a trained dog. "I have watched this video 50 times, Jake said. "I still do not understand what happened." "Maybe the creature was tired from fighting," Lisa suggested. "No," Jake shook his head. "Watch what happens next." In the video, Phillips stood up slowly. He kept eye contact with the Vorthik the entire time. The creature did not move. Phillips walked closer, and the Vorthik remained calm. When other soldiers approached, the creature became tense again. But when Phillips looked at it, it relaxed. The creature only responded to Phillips, Jake explained. It ignored the other soldiers completely. When Phillips told it to follow him, it did. The Vorthik walked onto our transport ship without any trouble. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. This was not normal animal behavior. Predators did not usually submit to strangers, especially not alien strangers. "Where is the creature now?" she asked. "In the biology lab on Deck 7, Jake replied. "We built a special enclosure for it. The strange thing is, it has been completely peaceful since we brought it here. It eats the food we give it. It does not try to escape, but it only stays calm when humans are around." Lisa saved the files to her personal computer. She wanted to study them more later. "I would like to examine the creature tomorrow morning." "Are you sure?" Jake asked. "Even though it seems tame, it is still dangerous. Those claws could cut through metal." "I will be careful," Lisa promised, "but I need to see it for myself." That night, Lisa sat in her small quarters reading reports. About Zirion Prime, the planet was covered in thick jungle. The colonists had built their settlement near a river, but they were having trouble expanding. The jungle was full of dangerous creatures, and the Vorthok was the worst of them. She also read Philip's report about the capture mission. He described the moment when he removed his helmet as instinctive. He felt like the creature was studying him, so he wanted to study it back. When their eyes met, he felt a strange connection, like the creature recognized him. The next morning, Lisa went to the biology lab. Dr. Amy Foster, the station's medical officer, met her there. Amy was a young woman with short red hair and a friendly smile. "I have been monitoring the creature since it arrived," Amy said. "Its vital signs are stable. Blood pressure, heart rate, brain activity, everything looks normal for a predator of its size." They walked to the enclosure. It was a large room with transparent walls made of reinforced glass. Inside, the Vorthok lay on a pile of soft material. That served as bedding. When it saw the two women approaching, it stood up. Lisa studied the creature carefully. It was even more impressive in person than in the pictures. Its muscles rippled under its skin as it moved. The four eyes tracked their movements with intelligence. "Has it shown any aggressive behavior?" Lisa asked. "None at all," Amy replied. "But watch this." Amy walked to the control panel and activated the feeding mechanism. A piece of meat dropped from the ceiling into the enclosure. The Vorthok looked at the food, then looked back at the two humans. It did not move toward the meat. "It will not eat unless a human is watching," Amy explained. "If we leave the room, it ignores the food completely. But as soon as someone comes back, it eats immediately." Lisa found this fascinating. She opened the control panel and activated the intercom system. "Can it hear us?" "Yes," Amy nodded. "The speakers work both ways." Lisa leaned toward the microphone. "Hello," she said simply. The Vorthok's head turned toward the sound of her voice. Its four eyes focused on her position near the glass wall. For a moment, Lisa felt like the creature was looking directly into her soul. Then something remarkable happened. The Vorthok made a sound, a low rumbling noise that came from deep in its chest. It was not aggressive or threatening. It sounded almost like purring. "It has never made that sound before," Amy whispered. Lisa moved closer to the glass. The Vorthok approached from the other side. They stood face to face with only the transparent barrier between them. Lisa looked directly into the creature's eyes. What she saw there surprised her. The eyes were not empty or mindless like those of a simple animal. There was intelligence there, and something else. Something that made her think the creature was trying to communicate with her. Vorthok placed one of its clawed hands against the glass. Lisa reached up and placed her own hand on the other side, matching the creature's gesture. For a long moment, they stayed like that. Human and alien predator, separated by glass, but connected by something neither could understand. "This is impossible," Amy breathed. "Wild predators do not behave this way." Lisa nodded, but she could not take her eyes off the creature. Deep in her mind, a thought was forming. This was not random behavior. The Vorthik was responding to something specific about humans. Something important. She made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, she would request permission to enter the enclosure and make direct contact with the creature. She needed to understand what the Vorthik saw. When it looked into human eyes, something told her that the answer would be more significant than anyone imagined. Captain Ben Hayes stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Aurora, watching the stars move slowly past the view screen. His crew had been traveling for 3 weeks, visiting different human colonies across the galaxy. Each stop brought new reports of the same strange phenomenon. "Captain, we are approaching the Theros system," announced Lieutenant Dave Morgan from the navigation station. "The ice research station is requesting permission to dock." Ben nodded. "Take us in, Lieutenant. Dr. Foster, are you ready for another investigation?" Dr. Amy Foster looked up from her data pad. She was a brilliant scientist with brown hair and sharp green eyes. For the past month, she had been collecting reports from across human space. The pattern she discovered was both fascinating and disturbing. "I have reviewed all the files from Theros," Amy said. "The situation there matches what we found on Nazarian Prime and the other worlds. Every apex predator species shows the same behavior when they encounter humans." Ben had seen the reports himself. On 12 different planets, the same story repeated. Dangerous predators that attacked everything else became calm and submissive when they looked into human eyes. It made no sense that the Aurora docked with the research station orbiting Theros. A planet below was covered in ice and snow. Massive. Storms moved across its surface like white hurricanes. Only the bravest scientists worked in such a hostile environment. Dr. Kevin Wright met them at the airlock. He was a marine biologist who had been studying the creatures of Theros for 2 years. His face was weathered from the cold, and his hands shook slightly as he spoke. "Thank you for coming," Kevin said. "What happened here 3 days ago has changed everything we thought we knew about the local wildlife." He led them to the observation deck. Through the thick windows, they could see the ice planet spinning slowly below. Kevin activated a holographic display that showed the layout of the research base on the surface. "We have been studying the frost moths for months," Kevin explained. "They are the top predators on Theros. Each one is about the size of a small building, with thick white fur and claws that can crack ice. They hunt in packs and can bring down prey much larger than themselves." Amy studied the holographic images of the creatures. The frost moths looked like giant polar bears, but with longer limbs and more intelligent eyes. Their fur was pure white, perfect camouflage for the snowy landscape. "What makes them so dangerous?" Ben asked. "They are smart," Kevin replied. "Smarter than any Earth predator. They can plan attacks, use tools, and work together in complex ways. Our research team has been very careful to avoid them." Kevin changed the display to show recent footage from the surface base. The video showed a team of 6 researchers working outside the main building. They were collecting ice samples and taking measurements. 3 days ago, Dr. Sarah Kim and her team were working about 2 kilometers from the base, Kevin continued. They did not know that a pack of frost moths was hunting in the area. The video showed the moment when everything changed. The researchers were loading equipment into their vehicle when the frost moths appeared. There were 5 of them, moving like white shadows across the ice. They surrounded the human team within seconds. Ben watched as the largest frost moth approached Dr. Kim. Creature was massive, with shoulders higher than a man's head. Its blue eyes were fixed on the human scientist. Sarah stood perfectly still, too frightened to move. "This is where it gets interesting," Kevin said. In the video, Sarah slowly reached up and removed her protective goggles. She looked directly at the pack leader. For a moment, Human and predator stared at each other across the frozen landscape. Then the Frostmaw did something unexpected. It lowered its head and stepped back. The other pack members followed its lead. Within minutes, all 5 creatures had moved away from the research team. That should have been the end of it, Kevin said. But it was not. The next part of the video showed what happened over the following hours. The Frostmaws did not leave the area. Instead, they began patrolling around the research site. When other dangerous creatures approached, the Frostmaws drove them away. They became protectors, Amy said in amazement. The apex predators were protecting the humans from other threats. Exactly, Kevin nodded. And it has continued for 3 days now. The pack refuses to leave. They have set up a permanent guard around our base. No other predator can get close to our people. Ben felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold planet below. This was the same pattern they had found on every world they visited. Apex predators recognizing something in human eyes and becoming protective rather than aggressive. Has anyone tried to communicate with them? Amy asked. Dr. Kim has been working on that, Kevin replied. She discovered that the Frostmaws respond to direct eye contact. When she looks at them, they seem to understand basic commands. They will move away or come closer, depending on what she wants. Amy made notes on her datapad. I need to add this to my report for the Galactic Council. The pattern is becoming impossible to ignore. Their next stop was the desert world of Sahara Nova. The mining colony there had been dealing with attacks from crystalline creatures called sand dragons. These predators lived deep in the desert and were nearly invisible. Against the rocky landscape, Colony Administrator Pete Johnson met them at the spaceport. He was a short man with sun-darkened skin and worried eyes. The mining operation was barely profitable, and predator attacks had made things worse. The sand dragons started attacking our equipment 6 months ago, Pete explained as he drove them toward the main settlement. At first, we thought they were just defending their territory, but the attacks got worse and worse. Through the vehicle windows, Ben could see the harsh desert landscape. The sand was orange and red, broken by tall rock formations. The heat was intense even inside the air-conditioned vehicle. How big are these creatures? Amy asked. About the size of a large truck, Pete replied. They have crystal-like skin that reflects light. When they bury themselves in the sand, you cannot see them until they attack. Their claws can cut through metal like paper. The mining settlement was a collection of domed buildings connected by covered walkways. Everything was designed to keep the sand and heat out. Pete led them to the operations center, where other colonists were waiting. Tell them about what happened last week, Pete said to a woman named Carol Davis. She was the head of mining operations and had been working on Sahara Nova for 3 years. I was checking the eastern dig site when 3 sand dragons attacked, Carol began. My security escort was killed in the first few seconds. I thought I was going to die. She paused, remembering the fear of that moment. One of the creatures had me cornered against a rock wall. It was about to strike when I looked directly at it. I do not know why I did that. Maybe I wanted to see death coming. What happened then? Ben asked. The creature stopped, Carol said. It tilted its head like it was confused. Then it backed away and made a sound I had never heard before. It was almost like singing. Amy leaned forward. Did the other creatures react the same way? Yes, Carol nodded. All 3 of them stopped attacking. They circled around me, but they did not try to hurt me. When the rescue team arrived, the sand dragons drove off other predators that were attracted by the noise. Pete added, since then, the attacks have stopped completely. The sand dragons now patrol the mining areas. They keep other dangerous creatures away from our workers. Production has increased by 40%. Ben and Amy exchanged glances. The same pattern again. apex predators becoming protectors instead of threats. Their final stop was the Corvin homeworld. The Corvin were a militaristic species known for their skill in combat. They had never asked for human help before, but recent events had changed that. General Thigmer met them at the embassy. He was a tall alien with gray skin and 4 arms. His species had been fighting the creatures of their world for thousands of years. "Your people have done something impossible," Thigmer said through a translator device. "The Shadow Stalkers have never shown submission to any living being." Shadow Stalkers were the apex predators of the Corvin homeworld. They were intelligent, deadly, and had been the greatest threat to Corvin civilization for generations. Even the best Corvin warriors avoided them when possible. "What exactly happened?" Amy asked. 3 of your diplomats were visiting our capital city," Thigmer explained. "A shadow stalker entered the building where they were staying. It should have killed everyone inside." The general showed them security footage of the incident. The shadow stalker was a creature of living darkness that seemed to absorb light. It moved like liquid shadow and had glowing red eyes. Ambassador Helen Clark was in the main hall when the creature appeared, Thigmer continued. She did not run or scream. She simply looked at the shadow stalker. In the video, Ben watched as the human diplomat faced the deadly predator. The creature approached her slowly, its red eyes fixed on her face. When they were only a few feet apart, Helen removed her glasses and looked directly into the shadow stalker's eyes. The reaction was immediate. The creature's aggressive posture melted away. It settled onto the floor like a giant cat and began making a sound that resembled purring. The shadow stalker that had terrorized Corvin warriors for centuries was acting like a domestic pet. Dr. Paul Newman wiped sweat from his forehead as he stood before the ancient ruins on Genesis Prime. The dead planet had no atmosphere, so he wore a full environmental suit. Through his helmet visor, he could see the massive stone structures. That had puzzled scientists for decades. "The readings are off the charts," said Dr. Rachel Stone, the team's language expert. She was studying her scanner with excitement. "These ruins are older than any civilization we have found in the galaxy." Dr. Chris Miller, their evolutionary biologist, was taking pictures of the carved symbols on the nearest wall. "Paul, you need to see this. These carvings show creatures that look exactly like the apex predators from modern worlds." Paul walked over to examine the wall. The stone was gray and weathered, but the carvings were still clear. He could see images of creatures that looked like the Vorthik from Xerion Prime, the Frostmaws from Theros, and dozens of other predators from across the galaxy. "This is impossible," Paul muttered. "These ruins are millions of years old. How can they show creatures that evolved on completely different worlds?" Rachel was running her translation program on the symbols near the carvings. "I am getting some results," she said. "The language is ancient, but I can make out a few words. Here it says something about children and guardians." The team moved deeper into the ruins. The buildings were huge, designed for beings much larger than humans. The doorways were 3 times taller than necessary, and the halls were wide enough for vehicles to drive through. "Whatever built this place was big," Chris observed. "But look at these smaller structures." He pointed to a section of the ruins that had different proportions. These buildings were sized for creatures about the same height as humans. The doorways and rooms were perfectly scaled for bipedal beings. Paul felt his heart racing with excitement. This was the discovery of a lifetime. "Set up the excavation equipment," he ordered. "We need to dig deeper." Over the next 3 days, the team worked carefully to uncover more of the ancient site. They found laboratories, living quarters, and what appeared to be genetic research facilities. Everything was preserved in the dry, airless environment of the dead planet. "Paul, you need to come see this," Rachel called from inside one of the laboratory buildings. Her voice was shaking with excitement. Paul hurried to her location. She was standing in front of a wall covered with detailed murals. These paintings were different from the simple carvings outside. They showed scenes of daily life in the ancient civilization. The murals depicted bipedal creatures that looked remarkably similar to humans. They had the same basic body shape, the same arm and leg structure, and most importantly, the same forward-facing eyes. In the paintings, these beings were working alongside the apex predators. Look at this scene. Rachel pointed to one section of the mural. The beings are not fighting the predators. They are cooperating with them. Paul studied the image carefully. It showed the human-like creatures riding on the backs of massive predators. Others showed the predators bringing food to the settlements. In every scene, the relationship appeared peaceful and cooperative. These creatures were not prey, Chris said as he analyzed the paintings. They were partners. Rachel had been working on translating more of the ancient text. She pulled up her notes on her datapad. I have figured out what they called themselves. The word appears hundreds of times in different contexts. What is it? Paul asked. First walkers, Rachel replied. They considered themselves the first intelligent species to walk among the stars. Chris was examining another section of the mural. Paul, look at this. These paintings show the first walkers seeding different worlds with eggs or genetic material. The scene Chris indicated showed first walker ships visiting barren planets. The beings were placing containers in the ground and tending to growing creatures. Over time, the paintings showed these creatures developing into the apex predators found on modern worlds. They were terraforming, Paul realized, but not just changing the environment. They were placing specific creatures on each world. Rachel found more text that supported this theory. Here it talks about preparing worlds for the return. The first walkers were creating guardians to protect the planets until they came back. But they never came back, Chris pointed out. The question is why. The team spent another week excavating the site. They found living quarters that showed how the first walkers lived. The furniture and tools were sized for beings almost identical to humans. Most fascinating were the mirrors and art that showed their faces. They look exactly like us, Chris said, studying a detailed carving of a first walker's head. Same facial structure, same eye placement, even the same expression patterns. Paul was examining genetic analysis equipment in one of the laboratories. The machines were incredibly advanced, far beyond anything humans had built. Some of them were still functional after millions of years. Chris, can you get a sample from this genetic storage unit? Paul asked. Chris carefully extracted a small amount of preserved genetic material from one of the storage containers. He fed it into their portable analysis computer. The results made him step back in shock. This cannot be right, he said, checking the readings again. What is it? Paul asked. The genetic structure is almost identical to human DNA, Chris replied. There are differences, but the basic pattern is the same. It is like looking at DNA from a distant human ancestor. Rachel had found the central archive of the first walker civilization. The room was filled with crystal storage devices that contained their entire recorded history. Her translation program was working overtime to process the vast amount of information. I found something incredible, she announced. The first walkers did not just create the apex predators. They programmed them with specific behavioral patterns. She displayed the translated text on her screen. Paul and Chris gathered around to read it. The apex predators were given genetic memories, Rachel explained. Built-in recognition patterns that would make them respond to the first walkers when they returned. What kind of recognition patterns? Paul asked. Eye contact, Rachel said. The first walkers programmed the predators to recognize the gaze of their creators. When the predators looked into first walker eyes, they would see their masters and become obedient. Chris was connecting the pieces. That explains why the predators respond to humans. We have the same eye structure as the first walkers. The predators see us and think we are their creators returning. Paul felt a chill run down his spine. But if we are so similar to the first walkers, what does that mean? Are we their descendants? Or did they create us too? The team worked through. The night defined answers. Rachel discovered records of the first walkers' final years. The civilization had grown too large and complex to maintain. They had spread across thousands of worlds, managing countless species. They became obsessed with control. Rachel read from the ancient texts. Every world had to be perfect. Every creature had to serve a purpose. They lost sight of their own identity while trying to shape the galaxy. Chris found genetic records that showed the first walkers had experimented with their own DNA. They had tried to create improved versions of themselves for different environments. Some attempts failed completely. Others succeeded too well, creating beings that were no longer truly first walkers. They scattered themselves across the galaxy, Chris said. Some groups tried to maintain the old ways. Others adapted to specific worlds. Many simply disappeared. Paul studied the final records of the civilization. The last entries talk about seeding a small blue world with their genetic legacy. A world they called the Water Garden. Earth, Rachel whispered. They are talking about Earth. The implications hit all three scientists at once. Humans were not just similar to the first walkers. They were their descendants, or possibly their final creation. The apex predators across the galaxy had been waiting millions of years for their creators to return, and now they had. We need to get this information back to Earth immediately, Paul said. This changes everything we thought we knew about human origins. Chris was still analyzing the genetic data. There is more. The first walkers did not just create the predators and humans. They left behind genetic markers that would allow their descendants to control the predator species. What kind of control? Rachel asked. Complete control, Chris replied. The predators are programmed to obey anyone with first walker genetics. They will protect us, serve us, and even die for us if necessary. Paul felt the weight of this discovery. Humans had inherited not just the legacy of the first walkers, but also their responsibility. Across the galaxy, apex predators were waiting for commands from their creators' descendants. We have to be careful with this information, Paul warned. If the wrong people learn about this, they could use it to build an empire. The first walkers fell because they became obsessed with control. Rachel was still finding new information in the archives. There is a warning here. The first walkers write about the burden of creation. They say that those who command the guardians must remember that power corrupts even the best. Intentions.Chris had found technical manuals that explained how the genetic programming worked. The recognition system is based on specific eye patterns and pheromone signatures. The predators can sense first walker genetics through multiple biological markers. Admiral Susan Blake sat at the head of the long table in Earth's High Command Center. The room was filled with the most important military and scientific leaders from across human space. Everyone had come to hear the report from Genesis Prime, but none of them were prepared for what they would learn. Dr. Paul Newman stood at the front of the room with a holographic display showing the ancient ruins. His team had returned from Genesis Prime 3 days ago, and they had been analyzing their findings around the clock. What we discovered changes everything we thought we knew about humanity, Paul began. The first walkers were not just another ancient civilization. They were our ancestors. General Robert Kane, the head of military operations, leaned forward in his chair. Explain what you mean by ancestors. Are you saying humans evolved from these beings? Dr. Chris Miller stepped forward to answer. Not evolved, General. Created. The genetic evidence shows that humans were designed using first walker DNA as a template. He activated the holographic display to show genetic comparison charts. The similarities between human and first walker DNA were impossible to ignore. The first walkers seeded Earth with their genetic legacy before their civilization collapsed. Chris continued. They wanted to preserve their species in case something happened to them. Admiral Blake studied the data carefully. She was a veteran of 30 years in space, and she had never seen anything like this. Dr. Miller, are you telling us that humans are artificial beings? Not artificial, Chris replied. Enhanced. The first walkers took their own genetic pattern and improved it for survival on Earth. We have all their basic traits, but with better adaptation to our environment. Dr. Adam Price, Earth's chief geneticist, had been studying the samples from Genesis Prime. He stood up to address the room. I have confirmed Dr. Miller's findings. Every human tested carries specific genetic markers that match the first walker pattern. What kind of markers? Asked Dr. Elena Ross, the head of behavioral psychology. The markers control how we see and how others see us, Adam explained. Our eyes have the same structure as first walker eyes. Our brain patterns produce the same recognition signals. Most importantly, we carry the genetic signature that the apex predators were programmed to obey. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Colonel Mary Foster, who had experience dealing with alien wildlife, spoke first. If this is true, it explains everything we have observed in the field. The predators are not just recognizing something familiar in our eyes. They are recognizing their creators. Admiral Blake turned to Dr. Ross. From a psychological perspective, what does this mean for human behavior? Elena had been studying the first walker records for 3 days. The first walkers had the same basic psychology as humans. They were curious, aggressive when threatened, and had strong pack bonding instincts. But they also had something else. She paused to gather her thoughts. They had an overwhelming need to control their environment. The records show that this drive eventually consumed their entire civilization. Paul activated another display showing first walker expansion across the galaxy. They started with good intentions. They wanted to make the galaxy safer and more stable. But over time, they became obsessed with perfection. Every world had to be exactly as they designed it, Rachel Stone added. She had joined the meeting by video link from the research station. Every creature had to serve a specific purpose. They lost sight of natural development and tried to control everything. General Kane asked the question everyone was thinking. Do humans have the same weakness? Are we destined to repeat their mistakes? That depends on what we do with this knowledge, Elena replied. The genetic markers give us the ability to control apex predators, but they do not force us to use that power. Admiral Blake stood up and walked to the large window overlooking Earth. The blue planet looked peaceful from space, but she knew that everything was about to change. We need to test this theory, she said. If humans can really control these creatures, we need to know the extent of that ability. Dr. Price had been preparing for this request. I have already run preliminary tests using the data from Genesis Prime. The genetic markers in human DNA should allow us to communicate with apex predators through a combination of eye contact, pheromone signals, and specific vocal patterns. Mean we can actually talk to them? Colonel Foster asked. More than talk, Price replied. According to the first walker records, we can give them complex commands. They are programmed to follow human instructions as if we were their pack leaders. Admiral Blake made a decision that would change the course of human expansion. I want field tests conducted immediately. But we proceed carefully. The first walkers fell because they became drunk on power. We will not make the same mistake. Over. The next 2 weeks, carefully controlled experiments were conducted on 12 different worlds. The results exceeded all expectations. On Zirian Prime, Dr. Lisa Carter was finally allowed to enter the Vorthic enclosure. She had been waiting for this moment since the creature was first captured. When she stepped inside, the massive predator approached her slowly. Lisa looked directly into the creature's 4 eyes and spoke in a calm, clear voice. "Sit," she said simply. The Vorthic immediately lowered itself to the ground. Lisa tried other commands. "Stand. Turn around. Come here." Each instruction was followed instantly and precisely, but the most amazing discovery came when Lisa tried more complex communication. She pointed to different objects in the enclosure and named them. Within hours, the Vorthic was responding to dozens of words. On Theros, Dr. Kevin Wright was working with the Frostmaw pack that had been protecting the research station. He discovered that the creatures could understand not just simple commands, but complex tactical instructions. "Guard the eastern approach," Kevin told the pack leader. "Watch for ice bears from the north." The Frostmaws immediately organized themselves into a defensive pattern. They posted sentries at the specified locations and maintained their positions for hours without further instruction. Even more impressive was their ability to report back. The pack leader approached Kevin and made specific sounds that clearly indicated when threats were detected and where they were located. On Sahara Nova, the sand dragons had become so cooperative that the mining operation expanded into previously dangerous areas. The crystalline predators scouted ahead of human teams, cleared paths through unstable terrain, and even helped locate valuable mineral deposits. Carl Davis, who had first made contact with the sand dragons, discovered that the creatures had been mapping the underground cave systems for generations. With human guidance, they shared this knowledge, revealing vast networks of tunnels that connected mining sites across the continent. The most significant test took place on the Corvin home world. Ambassador Helen Clark worked with the Shadow Stalker that had bonded with her. The creature's intelligence was even greater than expected. "The Shadow Stalker understands abstract concepts," Helen reported to Earth. "It can count, solve problems, and even seems to have emotional responses to different situations." General Thakmer watched these demonstrations with amazement and growing concern. "Your species has achieved in days what we could not accomplish in thousands of years," he told Helen. "But we must ask, what do you plan to do with this power?" Back on Earth, Admiral Blake convened another meeting of the High Command. The field test results were spread across the table like a map of humanity's new capabilities. "The tests confirm everything we found on Genesis Prime," Paul reported. "Humans can communicate with and command apex predators from any world. The creatures are not just obedient, they are eager to serve." Dr. Ross had been analyzing the psychological profiles of humans who worked with the predators. There are some concerning patterns emerging. Several test subjects report feeling intoxicated by the power. They describe it as addictive. "That matches what we found in First Walker records," Rachel added from her remote location. The historical accounts describe increasing obsession with control among their leadership. Admiral Blake knew they were at a crossroads. "We have inherited incredible power, but also incredible responsibility. How do we proceed without repeating the First Walker's mistakes?" Dr. Price suggested strict protocols. "We limit access to apex predator worlds. Only specially trained personnel with psychological evaluations. Regular rotation to prevent power addiction." Colonel Foster disagreed. "That approach failed for the First Walkers. They tried to control everything, including themselves. Maybe we need a different strategy. What do you suggest?" Admiral Blake asked. "Partnership instead of domination," Foster replied. "The predators want to serve, but maybe we can teach them to think for themselves too. Work with them as allies, rather than tools." Elena Ross found this idea intriguing. "The First Walker records show that the apex predators have the genetic potential for greater intelligence. They were limited to keep them obedient, maybe we can remove those limitations. That could be dangerous, General Kane warned. If we make them too smart, they might stop obeying us. Or they might become true partners, Admiral Blake said thoughtfully. The first walkers fell because they tried to control everything. Maybe. The secret is learning to share power instead of hoarding it. The Galactic Council chamber on Central Station was filled with representatives from dozens of species. Admiral Susan Blake stood at the speaking platform, knowing that her words would change the galaxy forever. Behind her, holographic displays showed evidence from Genesis Prime and the field tests across human space. Members of the Council, Susan began, 3 months ago, humans discovered something that explains the unusual behavior of apex predators toward our species. What we found has implications for every civilization in this chamber. Councillor Kethvar of the Zentari leaned forward in his chair. The Zentari were known for their philosophical nature and love of ancient mysteries. Admiral Blake, the reports we have received seem impossible. You claim that humans can control the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Not control, Susan corrected. Communicate with and guide. The distinction is important. She activated the first display, showing the ruins on Genesis Prime. We have discovered that humans are descendants of an ancient civilization called the First Walkers. These beings seeded the galaxy with apex predators millions of years ago. General Thakmer of the Corvin military stood up. His forearms gestured dramatically as he spoke. We have witnessed this phenomenon on our homeworld. The shadow stalkers that have terrorized my people for generations now follow human commands like trained animals. The predators were created to recognize and obey the First Walkers, Susan explained. Since humans carry First Walker genetic markers, the creatures see us as the returning creators. Minister Dexalon of the Delian Commonwealth was clearly worried. The Delians were traders who valued stability above all else. Admiral, if humans can command these creatures, what prevents you from using them to build an empire? The apex predators could make your species unstoppable. Susan had expected this question. Because we have learned from the First Walkers' mistakes. Their civilization fell precisely because they became obsessed with control. Dr. Paul Newman stepped forward to address the council. The First Walker archives contain detailed records of their decline. They started with good intentions, but gradually became consumed by the need to manage every aspect of the galaxy. They lost themselves in their quest for perfection, added Dr. Elena Ross, who had joined the presentation via hologram. Their society collapsed under the weight of trying to control too much. Councillor Kethvar was intrigued. And you believe humans will not repeat this pattern? We are taking steps to prevent it, Susan replied. Humanity proposes to establish the Predator Covenant, a formal agreement that will govern our interactions with apex predator species. She activated another display, showing the proposed treaty structure. Under this covenant, humans will serve as intermediaries between galactic civilization and apex predator worlds. We will not claim ownership of these creatures or use them. For conquest, what exactly does this intermediary role involve? Asked Minister Dex single quotes, Dr. Chris Miller answered from his position near the genetic analysis displays. We will help establish peaceful relationships between apex predators and other species. The predators can provide protection for colonies in exchange for resources and cooperation. Think of it as translation services, Paul added. The predators want to fulfill their purpose as guardians, but they need guidance to do so without threatening other species. General Thakmer remained skeptical. How do we know humans will not abuse this power? Your species is young and untested. Susan acknowledged his concern. We propose oversight by this council. Regular inspections of predator worlds, psychological evaluations of human intermediaries, and immediate intervention if we show signs of the same obsession that destroyed the First Walkers. Additionally, Elena said, we are implementing strict rotation policies. No human will work with apex predators for more than 2 years without extended evaluation periods. The debate continued for hours. Representatives from smaller species worried about being overwhelmed by human expansion. Others saw opportunities for safer exploration and development of dangerous worlds. Finally, Councillor Kethfer called for a recess. This council needs time to consider the implications of your proposal. We will reconvene tomorrow. That evening, Susan met with her team in their quarters on Central Station. Through the large windows, they could see ships from dozens of different species docked at the massive space station. Do you think they will accept the covenant? Paul asked. They do not have much choice, Susan replied. The apex predators are already responding to humans. We can either work within a formal framework or let the situation develop without oversight. Chris was reviewing data from the latest field tests. The results from New Terran are encouraging. The partnership model is working better than we hoped. New Terran was humanity's test case for the Covenant system. The colony world was home to massive creatures called stone bears, apex predators that had made settlement impossible until humans. ARRIVED Dr. Amy Foster, who was managing the New Terran project, had established a remarkable relationship with the local predator population. Instead of simply commanding the stone bears, she had worked to enhance their intelligence and decision-making abilities. The stone bears are learning to think independently while maintaining their protective instincts, Amy had reported. They patrol the colony borders but make their own decisions about threats. It is partnership, not slavery. The next day, the Galactic Council reconvened. The debate was intense, but shorter than expected. The reality was clear. Humans had inherited power over apex predators, whether the Council approved or not. The only question was how to manage that power responsibly. The Zentari delegation supports the Predator Covenant, Councillor Kethfor announced. We believe humans have shown wisdom in recognizing the dangers of their inheritance. General Thakmer was more reluctant. The Corvin will accept this arrangement, but we demand the right to monitor human activities on predator worlds within our territory. Agreed, Susan replied immediately. Transparency is essential to making this work. Minister Dexelon spoke for the Merchant Coalition. The Delian Commonwealth will support the Covenant if humans agree to share the economic benefits of predator world development. That was always our intention, Susan assured him. These worlds will be developed for the benefit of all species, not just humans. One by one, the other delegations voiced their support. The Predator Covenant was approved by a majority vote, establishing humanity as the official intermediaries for apex predator species across the galaxy. 6 months later, Dr. Lisa Carter stood in the observation deck of the research station orbiting New Terran. Below, she could see the colony that had grown from a struggling outpost to a thriving settlement. The stone bears moved freely through the streets, serving as both protectors and partners to the human colonists. Children played games with young stone bears, learning to communicate through gestures and simple sounds. Scientists worked alongside adult predators to study the planet's ecosystem. The relationship had evolved far beyond the simple master-servant dynamic of the original first. Walker design. It is beautiful, said Peter Kane, the young colonist who had become the settlement's primary liaison with the stone bears. He was only 22 years old, but he had shown remarkable skill in working with the creatures. More importantly, it is sustainable, Lisa replied. The stone bears are happy, the colonists are safe, and the planet's ecosystem remains balanced. She thought about the first walkers and their failed civilization. They had tried to control everything and lost themselves in the process. Humanity had chosen a different path: partnership instead of domination, cooperation instead of control. Dr. Carter, Peter said. "Do you think the first walkers would approve of what we have done?" Lisa considered the question carefully. "I think they would be proud that their descendants learned from their mistakes. The apex predators were meant to be guardians, not slaves. We have given them back their purpose while allowing them to grow beyond their original programming." Through the observation deck windows, they watched as a group of stone bears played with human children in the colony's central park. The massive creatures were gentle and careful, their enhanced intelligence allowing them to understand the fragility of their small companions. "The recognition in their eyes is different now," Peter observed. "At first, they looked at us like we were gods returning. Now they look at us like partners." Lisa nodded. This was exactly what humanity had hoped to achieve. The apex predators still recognized the genetic markers of their creators, but the relationship had evolved into something healthier and more sustainable. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of worlds. Humans worked alongside frostmaws on ice planets, cooperated with sand dragons in desert colonies, and partnered with shadow stalkers to explore dangerous regions of space. The Predator Covenant had been in effect for only 6 months, but it was already transforming galactic civilization. Worlds that had been too dangerous for settlement were now thriving colonies. Trade routes that had been threatened by predator attacks were now protected by the same creatures. More importantly, the apex predators themselves were flourishing. Enhanced intelligence had allowed them to develop culture, art, and even simple technology. They remained loyal to humans, but as equals rather than servants.